Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report company update from Vizsla Silver. Chatting with Mike Konnert, President and CEO. Company is traded on the NYSE and the TSX under the symbol VZLA. We're going to be talking about the resumption of field work at the Panuco Project, as well as a new acquisition, the Santa Fe claim package that includes a producing mine right along trend of this Panuco project. Mike, this news was announced last week, May 15th. Can you give us a bit of a background here on one, how the deal came together, but also the history of this claim package dating back to just 2008? The news release outlines how it is producing. It was moved into production pretty quickly through a staged process. Sounds like all through kind of private individuals. So, Mike, give us a little background on the Santa Fe claim, please.
Yeah, absolutely. We originally acquired the Panuco district from private Mexican mining companies, that had been in the hands of private companies for decades. And this is similar. This is an acquisition kind of off market. This isn't another TSXV listed company that we entered into this agreement with. This is, private Mexican mining family. And we're thrilled about this. This is going to be excellent growth for the company. And, it came to be over a number of years and a long relationship being built here with, good friends now, the vendors. And, we really admired what they've done. I first visited the mine probably 2 or 3 years ago around Christmas time, if I recall, and went to their underground, and it was, very well operated. The mining was done extremely well. And what appealed to me specifically was that this project had a huge amount of exploration upside that wasn't being tapped. This was a profitable mine, a very profitable mine for the vendors. And, they were focused on maybe 1 to 2 years of resources ahead of where they were mining, but they hadn't really tapped into the overall land package. And so from that relationship, we ended up acquiring the San Enrique concession, which sits in between Panuco and the Santa Fe mine. And that was the beginning of the relationship. That group became shareholders through that transaction. And then we continued to talk about, what it would look like if we were to acquire all of the land in that area plus the mill. And so this is the fruit of that labor. And for me, this is really us committing to that growth path that we discuss. And, I firmly believe that Vizsla Silver will be a 50 million ounce silver equivalent producer in the coming years, in the next 10 years. And the way that we'll do that is through continuing to acquire projects like this in our trend, and then exploring and developing and then producing from centers of mass. And, the first one will be, of course, project number one, where we'll see 20 million ounces of annual production from project number one. But we're always thinking about, where does that growth come from? Of course, every day that you're mining, you're depleting your resources, you're shrinking your resources every day. So we need to think about how we find more and more resources and then turn them into producing assets. So we've done that with exploration in the east. We made that discovery at Animas. We're drilling now in the east, but also at Colorado. And there's potential to continue to grow on that original Panuco project map. I suspect that there's going to be multiple centers of mass that will be producing from that concession area. We're also looking at how we're going to explore San Enrique to the south of us, and now Santa Fe. And the beauty of the Santa Fe deal is that if we're successful, or when we're successful with exploration, we find another center of mass there, we have this production facility here that's currently producing and will continue to produce as we go through this deal. But we have the opportunity to explore, find what we need to, and then exercise the full deal and take over the production facilities. What we likely do is take the construction team off of project number one when they're completed, move them here, and expand that mill to something that's probably closer to 1,000 tons per day, and process the resources that we may find in the future in the Santa Fe block here. So, if you fast forward 10 years, I could see there being multiple centers of production on the original Panuco project map. Certainly project number one, perhaps a satellite facility to the east of our known area where that Animas structure is, and then also in the south here with Santa Fe. And you could potentially be feeding the Santa Fe mill with or from, of course, the Santa Fe mine area, from other potential resources in the area, and then also from San Enrique. And I think it's really important to highlight that despite the fact that this district dates back, in this corridor, I should say, dates back to the Spaniards, there's been so little exploration in modern years that this is a very fertile exploration ground that really has not seen any meaningful exploration. The potential for big discoveries like what we found at Copala and Napoleon, truly exist in this area. And then, of course, to the north of Panuco, we have the La Garra property, which also, I believe, will in the future support production and large resources there too. So we're serious about this being the best place to explore in the world for high grade silver and gold, and we're putting that strategy into play here.
All right, thanks for outlining that because I did receive a couple emails on the back of that, and I think it is because even the headline says including a producing mine. A few of my listeners were wondering, does this turn Vizsla into a production company now? Does it fast track production, or is this more just building out the exploration portfolio for a longer life company? It sounds like it's more of the latter in the sense of more exploration. Yes, you have infrastructure, but this is more about having the land to explore on in the future.
Yeah, I think it can be both, but the big vision here is to be a very, very large producer. So, although this is producing at 350 tons per day, and again, it's a very profitable operation for the vendors. The reason that we were able to come to this deal is that they believe in the share value of Vizsla Silver. So this is highly weighted towards shares, and that was their preference. They want to share in the upside of this overall district and region. And this is an area that they've been working and their family's been working in for many decades. So, there's a bit of continuity in that. And I think, the fact that, well, first of all, yes, it does allow us a fast track, but it also allows us to consolidate this entire district and be part of a much bigger production story. So I think, your listeners should think about this allowing us to have a much, much larger growth profile and scale to be something that, could certainly rival the mid-tier silver producers and ultimately the major silver producers in due time.
So, Mike, let's tie this in with the resumption of field work. It was a temporary pause. You and I talked about it when that pause happened, and it also happened for other companies in the area. Now that you're back on site, especially at Panuco, what does this mean for the test mining and the exploration that's ongoing?
Well, both are proceeding very well, and I'm very excited about this test mine. We're making excellent progress. Our daily rate is incredible, and the team is working very smoothly with the contractors. So, that's of course underway. We're thrilled about that. Exploration is going very well. In addition, so we've been able. It was back in COVID. We had to shut down a few times, and with those shutdowns, we spent a lot of time doing desktop review. And of course, when we returned after COVID, we made a discovery at Napoleon based on that information. And similarly, we also, during this period of time, had some new information to interpret, some and geophysics, and we were able to look at that and determine an interesting target north of the Copala zone, as well as, very excited to follow up on the San Dimas, the Animas area in the east. So there's a lot that we've learned over the 4 weeks that we shut down, and I think it's going to be really impactful with the exploration that we're doing right now. So we do have rigs turning on the property, working on new discoveries. So it's thrilling for us to think that we're not only test mining at Copala, so getting closer and closer every day to that mineralization, but also looking and making new discoveries throughout the district.
So, Mike, what is the allocation now in terms of the drill rigs that are turning, the meters that are being drilled between continuing to build out that center of mass, the main resource area, but then also looking true exploration across the projects for other new discoveries, other center of masses?
Well, it's funny. It's not like it was a number of years ago where we, said, okay, we're going to do 60,000 meters and we're going to have 4 rigs here and 2 rigs there. we have, I believe, 6 rigs on site, and a number of those are focused on geotech drilling that's going to help with mine development. But most times we have 2 rigs basically focused on new discoveries, and that's part of a rolling 10,000 meter drill program that certainly has scope to increase. And so I could see us having a growing number of exploration rigs on the property towards the end of the year. And then, of course, when we reach fully financed and have the capex covered for project number 1, which of course we're working very diligently on right now, I could see us expanding that exploration program and really focused on making these new discoveries as we go through the construction and development period of project number 1. So exploration is a major part of what we're doing. Exploration is a huge part of our DNA, of course, and we owe the success that we've had so far really all to that great exploration that we've done over the last 6 years. So, this will be a very exciting year for us. Multiple rigs on site drilling and working towards not only making new discoveries, but growing those centers of mass with step out drilling and those types of things.
What are some of the key targets or all the targets that you're going to be drilling this year in terms of areas? You already mentioned drilling to the east around that Animus discovery. Colorado, you mentioned too. What are the total number of, again, areas that you are going to be exploring, all with that whole discovery focus?
Well, we always say on the presentation, 150 untested drill targets, across the district, but in reality, it's much more than that. And you need to rank and prioritize these targets. And so we have this rolling, call it 10 top priority targets, and Colorado is one of those. The Animus structure that we drilled and made that discovery on is one of those. There's Jesucita and Santa Maria and other ones to the east that are very interesting to us as well. There's a structure that I like a lot that's north of La Colorada and Copala. So, there's really kind of an endless list, and with more and more information that we receive through exploration like electromagnetics and mapping, sampling, those types of things, that list gets further and further refined. But I can tell you that the ones that we're drilling right now are certainly top targets, but we have a handful of others to follow right behind it. And I think there's kind of 2 things we want to do. One is show that there's a lot of potential for growth within the center of mass of project number 1, which is to say maybe a 2-kilometer radius around, let's say, the mill site, and then new centers of mass to the east. And so that's really where that Animus drilling is focused. The San Dimas target, the Camellia San Dimas target to the south was very interesting as well. We're reinterpreting what we understood through drilling there. There's some complexities with cross-cutting structures and faults and folds and those types of things, but there really is a big structure that we're keen on to the south. And then, all the way up to Santa Lucia in the east, there's many different interesting structures. And it's a little bit more reminiscent, I would say, of what you see at San Dimas, the mine, Tayoltita San Dimas, where you have more consistently vertical structures, call it 2 to 3 meters thick on average, and very, very high grade. So it's a little bit different than what you see out in the west at Copala, where you have these flatter line structures that blow out to up to 80 meters thick and average out at 10 with very high grades. So it's all about finding the right mix and the right structures and then targeting them. But we're doing a lot of work to get to that, which has to do with the electromagnetics and the sampling, mapping, and interpreting that data.
Let's talk about the de-risking aspect too, the economic studies, feasibility also on tap. What still needs to be done to work on that, and when do you think we're going to see that?
So we're working through the feasibility study right now with our consultants, and it's been our goal from the beginning, from when we started preparing the PEA, that we'd use numbers that were realistic enough and based on what we could really mine in an M&A category and what could be upgraded into reserves. So we actually expect the feasibility study to be generally in line with what we saw in terms of the numbers at the PEA, which is to say they're incredible, right? And what I think we might end up seeing at the feasibility study is an extension of that high number of throughput of silver equivalent ounces. Instead of 20 million ounces in year 1 and 2, perhaps that higher rate of production can extend into the following years. But really the focus is to front load the grade ounces, the near surface ounces in the mine plan in order to facilitate that extremely fast payback and extremely high IRR, which the team has been working on very well. And I'm really excited about the feasibility study. I think oftentimes, these economic studies or development studies aren't exactly catalysts for companies, mining companies, and that's typically the case when the capex is many times the market cap. But in our case, the capex, which I expect to remain relatively in line with the PEA numbers, is really a fraction of our overall market cap. And I think in that sense, the feasibility study could really be a catalyzing event for the share price.
So, Mike, look, you guys have a lot on the go, right? But let's talk cash and let's also tie it in with project financing. If you're already going to be at the feasibility stage, yes, I understand you're still doing a lot of other drilling, a lot of other exploration work, but what cash do you have to advance all this work right now? And when do you need to deal with financing a project build?
Well, the time for us to deal with financing the project was basically, I'd say about 18 months ago, which is when we started. A lot of the times the potential partners for project finance were a bit shocked at what they thought was how early we were progressing these conversations, but it turned out to be the right time because, of course, we've moved very rapidly through the PEA into the test mine, and now we're basically just waiting on permits and the feasibility study. So we've proceeded with project finance partners. We've gone down to a very short list now and working with those groups to kind of finalize terms and look at trade-offs and things like that. So we have 100 million US in the bank right now, and we expect to kind of continue that balance, 100 million, probably towards the end of the year. If at this rate here, we'd probably be somewhere around 75 million US, which would set us up very nicely for going into the project finance, which I suspect will follow the feasibility study. And that would allow us to effectively be fully funded for the construction of the project. And really the only final puzzle piece there, of course, is the granting of the permits, which I've started to see a lot of private Mexican mining companies receive permits right now. I think the tide's turning and we'll start to see a flow of MIAs being granted. So we're doing everything we can in our power here at Vizsla to be very well situated for that receival of a permit and really start construction, being in a fully financed state as fast as we can and target production and towards the end of 2027.
All right. Mike, I guess just wrap us up then. Quick overview. What are the near-term news releases? Where are the catalysts coming from in the next couple months?
Well, I think just before that, I think it's important even to highlight the Mag Silver and Pan American deal because that's now been the third silver transaction in the last 12 months for basically all these single asset silver producers, which very, very, very similar to what Vizsla is moving towards here. And what's consistent across those is basically the PNAV multiple, which is about 1.7, and then the cash flow multiple, which is about 15 times cash flow, which is really just incredible. And so if we think about the entire silver universe, there's projects mostly in Latin American countries, but all over the world. And the last three kind of heavyweight ones, the major ones have all been in Mexico, have all been single asset silver producers. So I think it shows that Mexico is very much open for business, but also the most desirable location for major mining companies. And then if you look at the cash flow multiple as well, that indicates a massive, massive re-rating for Vizsla over the coming several years as we de-risk and then construct and then start to produce. So I just wanted to highlight that Mag deal is now the third meaningful silver deal. And I think the implication is for Vizsla that the share price will go much higher as we continue to do what we're doing. And so that the news flow, the steps as we proceed and as we get to the end of the year here really have to do with de-risking. So we'll have an update on the test mine. I think we'll be able to show some photos, which I'm excited about. I want people to see what we've been doing there. The feasibility study will be a great update. New discoveries, those types of things, exploration updates, all will be really exciting and all be important catalysts for the story. But to be this well funded, to be moving forward towards being fully funded with all these catalysts, if you go back and look at all of the peers that have gone down this path in the past, this is a really highly rewarding time for shareholders. So I'm excited about that.
All right, Mike. We'll wrap it up there then. I know there's going to be a lot of news coming, so please, everyone, click that link in the show notes. Go over to the VZLA website and send me any questions you have for Mike, and I will follow up on the back of some more of the news releases that are coming in the coming months. Mike, thanks again for your time. I appreciate the update.
Thank you, Corey.